Dostoevsky's The Idiot, a dark philosophical mirror of our society. Have you ever had the feeling that the society we live in is increasingly lost in its own contradictions? Why do purity, empathy, and truth seem to be ridiculed, while arrogance, coldness, and vanity are exalted? In The Idiot, Dostoevsky holds up a dark mirror before us, and the reflection that appears there is uncomfortably current. Through the character of Prince Mishkin, the author invites us to reflect on what it really means to be good in a world where kindness seems to have no place. This philosophical and deeply human work reveals, with rawness, how society treats those who deviate from the norm, and how the ideal of purity can be crushed by the harshness of the modern world. If this type of reflection makes sense to you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Here, we dive deep into the great works of literature to see the shadows of today's world, and perhaps, find ways to illuminate our journey. 1. Mishkin's Purity and Society's Contempt. Mishkin, protagonist of The Idiot, is not naive in the common sense of the word. He represents a rare kind of spiritual purity. His kindness, empathy, and sensitivity are almost anachronistic amid the emotional brutality of those around him. He is a character who, instead of adapting to the rules of the social game, remains integral to his essence. But this integrity is what makes him a target of disdain and misunderstanding. In a world governed by power games, appearances, and hidden interests, Mishkin's behavior seems strange, even uncomfortable. His lack of malice disconcerts those around him, as if he were a mirror where others saw their own deformations. And that irritates them, not because he is threatening, but because his purity forces them to confront their own inner rot. The figure of Mishkin invites us to reflect. How do we react to genuine kindness? Do we unconsciously also ridicule or push her away because she seems weak or foolish? Today's society, marked by irony, distrust, and pragmatism, seems to have lost the ability to recognize the value of essential innocence. Purity today is confused with weakness. Dostoevsky draws this contrast in a brutal way. The characters around Mishkin, manipulative, proud, selfish, cannot even understand his emotional logic. Goodness, in this novel, is not an exalted ideal, but a burden. And this tells us a lot about the way in which, even today, society welcomes those who choose a more compassionate path. It is painful to realize that Mishkin's figure, although inspiring, also shows us the loneliness of those who try to live ethically and sensitively in a hardened world. Their suffering comes not from the wickedness of others alone, but from the general inability to recognize the light when it appears. Kindness, instead of being welcomed, is isolated and ignored. How often do we see this happen in real life? Generous people being exploited, deceived, or labeled as fragile. We live in an era where self-preservation has become a mantra, and empathy has been almost banned from human relationship. Mishkin, in this context, represents a silent resistance to the logic of selfishness. But how far can this resistance go? In the novel, we realize that kindness alone, without support or understanding, does not last long. And this brings us to a disturbing question. Does kindness need to become hard to survive? Or are we doomed to suffocate everything that is pure, just because we don't know how to deal with it? When he is rejected, ridiculed, and, often, exploited, Mishkin alerts us to the fate we reserve for sensitive souls in our society. He is not a passive martyr. He is a reflection of a world where the highest values are treated as madness. Therefore, when we read The Idiot, we are not just following the trajectory of a character. We are being invited to look inside and realize how we treat those who, even imperfect, try to live with an open heart. And the question remains, are we capable of welcoming someone like Mishkin, or would we be just one of those who judge him? If this topic is making you reflect, comment here. Do you believe that kindness still has a place in the world we live in? Your opinion can open this debate even further. 2. The fragility of kindness in a cynical world. One of the most painful aspects of reading The Idiot is to realize how kindness, however noble it may be, seems fragile in the face of everyday cruelty. Prince Mishkin, despite his moral integrity, is emotionally disintegrating in the face of social pressure and the manipulative games around him. Purity, which should be your strength, ends up becoming your vulnerability. This makes us reflect. To what extent is it possible to keep kindness intact in a cynical world? In an environment where cleverness is valued more than truth, and where sarcasm replaces empathy, anyone who acts from the heart is seen as a fool. Dostoevsky's literature forces us to face this tension between ethical values and survival strategies. The society built around Mishkin is not very different from ours. We live in a culture that praises emotional self-control, cold rationality, and extreme individualism. And, in this context, being kind is seen almost as a character defect, something that needs to be corrected, tamed, erased. Sensitivity turned into weakness. However, The Idiot shows that kindness is not a lack of strength. It is, in fact, a different kind of strength. A silent force, which resists even when it is not understood. Mishkin remains true to himself until the end, even at the cost of his mental health and inner peace. He doesn't toughen up, and that's tragic but also deeply moving. This dilemma is very current. How many times have we asked ourselves if it's worth being good, when everything around us seems to reward those who lie, manipulate, or pretend? Mishkin represents this existential doubt. Be faithful to the soul or adapt to the rules of the game. Most people choose the second path, not out of malice but out of fear. Dostoevsky, with his genius, does not give us ready-made answers. It just shows the price of kindness in a corrupted world. And that price is high. What hurts The Idiot, it is not Mishkin's failure, but society's failure to recognize his value. He is not defeated because he is weak, but because he is surrounded by people who have lost the ability to love. This is a fundamental point. Kindness alone cannot be sustained. She needs an environment where she can flourish, sincere bonds, recognition. Mishkin does not fail because he is good. He fails because he is alone. And perhaps this is the biggest warning in the book. Without community, the light goes out. Still, the novel is not a call to cynicism. Rather, it is a silent cry for a world where kindness can be cultivated and protected. A world where being sensitive is not a sentence of pain. A world where souls like Mishkin are not seen as idiots, but as beacons of humanity. Perhaps this is the great lesson of The Idiot. Kindness is necessary, but it needs to be supported by a new collective ethic. An ethics that values affection, listening, tenderness. An ethics that transforms fragility into strength. An ethic that, who knows, we can still build. And have you ever felt like your kindness was mistaken for weakness? Tell us in the comments. Your experience can help other people understand that being good is not a mistake. It is an act of courage. 3. Pride, ego, and the loss of the human essence. In The Idiot, the contrast between Mishkin's humility and the pride of the other characters is overwhelming. Dostoevsky constructs figures driven by ego, the desire for control, and the obsession with status. These characters are not caricatures. They are living archetypes of the modern human being, people so caught up in their own vanity that they have lost connection with the essential thing, the soul. The ego, in this novel, is not just an individual characteristic. It is a collective force, an invisible structure that shapes social relations and determines who deserves respect. And in this world shaped by appearance, anyone who refuses to play the game, like Mishkin, is seen as inadequate. Pride, in this sense, is the true, invisible idiot that inhabits others. Dostoevsky shows us how the ego disguises itself as virtue. There are characters who talk about honor, dignity, morals, but deep down, everything is just an expression of wounded vanity. Ego masquerades as integrity, when in reality it is just a fear of appearing small. And this is a dilemma we still face today, in the age of egos inflated by social media. The loss of the human essence is revealed when authenticity is no longer a priority. In The Idiot, almost no one is truly who they are. Everyone is playing roles, holding up masks. The society created by Dostoevsky is a stage of vanity, where being truthful is dangerous, and being vulnerable is unforgivable. Mishkin's humility, on the other hand, is uncomfortable because it dismantles this scenario. He doesn't compete, he doesn't manipulate, he doesn't pretend. And, for this very reason, it threatens those who live on appearances. By not playing the game, he lays bare the absurdity of social rules. The world rejects him because he unintentionally reveals that everything is an illusion. This criticism is intensely current. We live in an era where the ego is fed daily. It's all about performance. Who looks stronger, more successful, more desirable. And in the midst of this war of appearances, the human essence is being suffocated until it disappears. We become characters of ourselves. But will it be possible to rescue this essence? Can we, as a society, rediscover the value of humility, simplicity, truth without artifice? Dostoevsky's novel suggests that this is possible, but it requires a deep dive into one's own shadow and a renunciation of the pride we learn to cultivate from an early age. Ego is not just an individual issue, it is also a collective symptom. Therefore, the change needs to be cultural. We need spaces where a person's value does not depend on appearance, bank account, or rhetoric. We need to rehumanize the look. And this is the philosophical challenge that The Idiot proposes to us. If pride distances us from our essence, humility can be the way back. But it is a silent path, which requires courage to lose status and gain depth. Mishkin does not show us a model of success, but a model of integrity. And perhaps that is what is most lacking in the world today. And do you feel that the people around you value appearance more than essence? Comment here and share your perception. Your vision may inspire others to reflect too. 4. Nastasia Filipovna. Suffering as a mirror of the human condition. Nastasia Filipovna is, without a doubt, one of the most complex characters in Dostoevsky's literature. She is not just a woman marked by pain. She is the very incarnation of the internal struggle between dignity and degradation, love and self-destruction. In his trajectory, we find a painful mirror of the human condition. Since her youth, Nastasia has been a victim of abuse, manipulation, and humiliation. This shaped his personality with deep wounds, creating a figure that, on the outside, exudes arrogance and irony, but inside carries devastating pain. She is a torn soul who no longer believes in the possibility of being loved without being used. Their destructive behavior is not gratuitous. It is a cry of revolt against a society that shaped her as an object and then discarded her. Nastasia refuses to accept the role of docile victim. On the contrary, she challenges everyone with her provocative stance, testing the moral limits of those around her. At the same time, there is a deep ambiguity in it. She wants to be saved, but sabotages all attempts at redemption. She desires Mishkin's love, but fears that he will see her as pure, something she herself cannot believe she is. This duality is devastating. It's deeply real. Dostoevsky makes us feel compassion for Nastasia, without transforming her into an idealized heroine. She is too human. He carries his contradictions with brutal sincerity. And in doing so, it forces us to face our own wounds. How many times do we sabotage love for fear of not deserving it? How many times do we push away those who love us because we don't know how to deal with the light? The relationship between Mishkin and Nastasia is one of the most painful points in the novel. He sees her with clear eyes, but she doesn't feel worthy of that look. And this distance between the vision we receive from others and the image we have of ourselves is a chasm that is difficult to bridge. Many people live this conflict every day. Nastasia represents the victims of a society that pretends to respect women, but treats them as emotional commodities. She is the symbol of the woman who tries to maintain her dignity in a world that labels and imprisons her. And therefore, his suffering transcends fiction. It is a living denunciation of social and moral oppression. His final tragedy is not just a matter of fate. It is the result of a society incapable of accepting pain sensitively. Dostoevsky shows us that when pain is not listened to, it turns into destruction. And Nastasia is the portrait of this voiceless pain. What do we learn from it? That suffering should not be ignored or silenced. That pain needs to be listened to deeply, not judged. That not everyone who walks away from love does so out of coldness. Many do it out of fear. And that, often, the people who seem toughest are precisely those who most need support. If this topic touched your heart, write in the comments. Have you ever met someone like Nastasia? Someone who, behind the armor, hid immense pain? Share your experience. It can generate empathy and reflection in those who accompany us. 5. The Idiot as a critique of social and moral hypocrisy. Dostoevsky builds the idiot as a cruel portrait of the hypocrisy that permeates all spheres of social life. Behind refined appearances, moralistic speeches, and etiquette conventions, the author reveals a universe where falsehood, opportunism, and cynicism dominate. And it is precisely in this scenario that Mishkin's figure becomes even more disturbing, because his sincerity exposes the contradictions hidden beneath the surface. The prince, with his disconcerting transparency, lays bare the hidden intentions of those around him. He doesn't judge anyone, but his mere presence is a nuisance. He doesn't pretend, he doesn't lie, he doesn't manipulate. And for this very reason, it disrupts the established order. Hypocrisy needs silence and disguises to survive, and Mishkin represents the exact opposite of that. The elites portrayed in the novel live on appearances. They pretend to values they don't practice, they defend ideals they don't feel, they swear love where there is only interest. Marriage, for example, appears more as a social transaction than as a true emotional bond. Friendship is often a game of convenience. Ethics is mere empty speech. This portrait still resonates in our times. We live in an era where moral discourse is on the rise, but moral practice, not so much. Social networks flood us with beautiful phrases, inspiring messages, promises of authenticity. But how many of these manifestations are really sincere? How many are just modern masks for ancient hypocrisy? The novel's great critical strength lies in the way Dostoevsky shows that evil is not just in visible acts, but in silent pacts of collective pretense. It is the normalization of falsehood that sustains the system. And when someone tries to break this pact, as Mishkin does, he becomes a threat. Not because it confronts others directly, but because it breaks the complicit silence. This criticism is devastating, and, at the same time, deeply current. In a world where everything is an image, the character who lives with a true soul seems out of place. Social hypocrisy is not only morally reprehensible, it is a survival structure. Therefore, whoever breaks it suffers. Dostoevsky does not propose a moral utopia. It just shows the tragedy of a world where values have lost their meaning, where morality serves more to judge others than to guide one's own conduct, where good has become a theater role and evil hides behind the curtain of convenience. Prince Mishkin forces us to face an uncomfortable question: could we bear to live with someone truly ethical? Or would we also feel threatened by their presence? Could it be that, without realizing it, we are also part of this silent pact of hypocrisy? This reflection is tough, but necessary. What the idiot proposes to us is a collective examination of conscience. It's not about pointing fingers, but about understanding how we all, to some extent, contribute to a world where the false is more comfortable than the real. If this topic made you think, write in the comments. Have you ever felt like you were living in an environment where everything was appearance and no one said what they really felt? Share your vision. It can open the way for more honest dialogue. 6. Madness, Holiness and the Limit of Human Understanding. One of the most complex topics in The Idiot, it's the fine line between holiness and madness. From the beginning, Prince Mishkin is seen by many characters as strange, different, or even sick. But what exactly does he have? Is it really madness, or is it a form of spiritual consciousness that society still cannot understand? Dostoevsky does not respond directly. He throws this ambiguity into the air, inviting the reader to reflect. Mishkin has epileptic seizures, speaks with purity, loves with intensity, forgives easily. He seems out of place in the ordinary world, and this difference is immediately labeled as pathological. But is it really? The history of humanity is full of figures who were seen as crazy in their time and saints later, or the opposite. Prophets, mystics, healers, artists, all those who access an unconventional type of consciousness are often misunderstood. Society fears what it does not understand, and deep spirituality often seems crazy to shallow eyes. Mishkin is that enigma. He sees beyond appearances, feels intensely, and acts with almost divine compassion. But this sensitivity is seen as weakness or delusion. In the background, the idiot asks us, could the problem be with him, or with the mediocrity of those around him? This tension between madness and holiness is also a philosophical provocation. Reason, exalted by modernity, does not always account for the mysteries of the soul. And Dostoevsky, instead of proposing rational answers, plunges us into this existential abyss. What does it mean to be normal in a sick world? Mishkin could be a bodhisattva, a modern Christ, a pure spirit who incarnated amid the mud to try to turn on the light, but was rejected. Society, unable to recognize his greatness, classifies him as crazy. And that says more about collective blindness than about him. In the end, this confusion between madness and holiness reveals the limits of our understanding. We still have very narrow parameters to judge what is human. We confuse intensity with instability, spirituality with delirium, empathy with weakness, and as a result, we miss the chance to recognize rare souls when they appear. Dostoevsky invites us to broaden our gaze, rethinking the criteria with which we judge others, realizing that not every difference is an illness, and that, sometimes, the real crazy person is the one who fits perfectly into an insane world. This reflection can be painful, but also liberating. It shows us that there are other ways of being, feeling, existing, and that the path of the soul will not always be understood by social logic. Perhaps, like Mishkin, we all have a piece of light that the world doesn't know how to decipher. And you, have you ever felt that your sensitivity was mistaken for weakness or madness? Have you ever seen someone judged for seeing deeper? Tell us here in the comments. Your story can help others to recognize themselves too. 7. What the Idiot reveal about us today. More than a century after its publication, The Idiot remains a hauntingly timely portrait of our human condition. What was once a critique of 19th-century Russian society today fits perfectly into the dilemmas of the 21st century. That's because Dostoevsky didn't write about a specific time. He wrote about the human soul, its pains, contradictions, and deepest wounds. Mishkin's character continues to resonate because he represents what we try to suffocate: kindness without interests, empathy without reward, purity without mask. He is a silent threat to the utilitarian logic that governs our world. A world where everything needs to have, exchange value, including feelings. The novel exposes the crisis of meaning that is going through our era. A time when human relationships were replaced by quick connections, where love is confused with need and the truth is shaped by algorithms. In this scenario, figures like Mishkin are rarer and more necessary than ever. Dostoevsky forces us to face a painful question. Are we still capable of recognizing purity when it appears? Or have we become so used to coldness that we confuse light with madness? These questions, while uncomfortable, are urgent, because they concern the type of society we are building, and the type of human being we are becoming. Perhaps the biggest warning of The Idiot be this: If we do not cultivate spaces for sensitivity, listening and acceptance, there will be no humanity left in us. And what will seem madness tomorrow will only be the last breath of the soul trying to survive in a world suffocated by cynical reason. Mishkin is not a hero in the traditional sense. He doesn't win. He doesn't save anyone. But he shows a way. Another way of existing, even if this way seems incompatible with the current world. And that's the true strength of the novel. It doesn't offer us easy solutions, but it forces us to look more deeply at our daily choices. To read The Idiot today, it's like lighting a candle in the middle of chaos. Not to illuminate everything, but to remember that there is still another way of seeing, feeling, relating. And that maybe, if each of us protects that inner flame, the world doesn't need to be so dark. Therefore, more than a literary work, The Idiot, it's an existential provocation. It uninstalls us, deconstructs us, and invites us to seek meaning beyond appearance, vanity, and ego. An invitation that few accept, but that profoundly transforms those who accept it. And you, after all this, still think that Mishkin was the idiot? Or is it us, because we still don't know how to value the pure soul when it appears before us? If this video touched you, leave your comment. What was the part that moved you the most? Your reflection can inspire other people to see the world with different eyes. Literature has the power to reveal to us what we prefer not to see. And The Idiot by Dostoevsky does this masterfully. He doesn't offer us a happy ending, but he hands us a mirror, a dark philosophical mirror where each reader, if they have the courage, can see their own conflicts, their masks, and their deepest truth. Mishkin is not just a character. He is a proposal for life. A life that chooses sensitivity over coldness, compassion over indifference, truth over appearance. Even if it costs dearly. Even if the world calls him crazy. Maybe it's time to rescue that courage. The courage to be good in a world that has unlearned to welcome kindness. If this video touched your soul, like it now, share it with someone who needs to reflect on this, and subscribe to the channel. Here, each classic work is a key to awakening your consciousness. And if you want to continue reflecting deeply, click on the card that appears there. We have more content that will expand your view of life.